the chat. Feel free to type anything in chat if anything comes up, and I can answer those questions as we go, or we can save them to the end, depending on what makes sense. Okay, so we're going to start out. I'll share my screen with you guys. And just a brief overview of our session today. Like I said, we'll go through tips and tricks for setting up and starting and implementing Module 1 in your classroom. We'll talk a little bit about participatory simulations, and then we'll open it up and I can answer questions about anything, the coding portion, Star Logo Nova, whatever comes up. So setting up for a successful implementation in your classroom, we've discovered a lot of different tips and tricks as we've done this in our own classrooms and as we've talked to teachers who have implemented successfully. So there are several strategies that can really reduce the number of questions and the amount of frustration you end up with, and also facilitate that problem solving that we love. So some of the main ones are pair programming. And there are many, many reasons for this, and I'll get into those in just a second. So you can see on the screen here, these are a few of the tips and tricks that we really like to emphasize because we've just had so much success with them in our classrooms. So pair programming, in week 2, you guys saw a video from the kids' perspective and why they enjoy pair programming and how it works with the driver who's actually at the keyboard and the navigator who's kind of focusing on the big picture. We as teachers really like pair programming for some different reasons. The number one thing that won me over in my classroom was that I ended up with fewer mistakes and questions. And there's 2 reasons for that. One is obviously you have 16 projects versus 32 or whatever number of students you have in your classroom if you have them working in pairs. And so even if worst case scenario, every group has a question, that's still half as many questions as you would have if students were working individually. But also, when students work in pairs, and especially if the navigator is filling their role correctly, and looking at the big picture and checking for bugs, students will help each other catch their mistakes. And so that really reduces the questions that you get on the little nitpicky things that you've probably already mentioned, or that they really just needed someone to look at their code. So by having 2 people look at their project together and work on it, you end up with fewer questions. Also, as you saw in the video, there's a much higher satisfaction rate for most students involved in pair programming versus working alone. And of course, there's a myriad of reasons why that's the case, but overall, the satisfaction comes from having kind of a partner in crime who can help you through that frustration, and you're not just alone, but also, like I said, not experiencing as many questions and as many places and times when you get stuck. And then my favorite thing about this, truly after doing it for a while, is I really do see a higher quality and level of understanding. And there's a ton of research to show this as well on pair programming at all levels, from elementary through college and even the industrial level. And that is when 2 people are working on a project versus working separately and maybe combining, you end up with a deeper understanding of the content, which at first may seem counterintuitive given that, you know, you're not the one always coding. But that comes from that level of discussion that is always happening between the driver and the navigator. And so not only does this make the teacher's life easier in just the day-to-day going through the classroom, having fewer questions to answer, but it also makes your job easier in that the students are kind of teaching themselves as they have a conversation, and they end up understanding it better and submitting better projects than they would individually. Another strategy that we love to use in Project Guts, and that I use religiously in my classroom, is the cup system. So I'm just going to demonstrate that with you. On every table in my classroom, so that's every 2 seats, because I have students sitting in pairs to do pair programming, there's a set of cups. There's a red, a yellow, and a green. And on a normal day, these will just sit there, and at any given moment, most of them will be set to green. I also write the color on the cup for my students who may have color vision issues. And so green is a signal to me and to their peers that everything is good in their group. They're not stuck, it's all a go, and they're working fine. Yellow in my classroom means that they have a question, but they're currently in the getting unstuck phase. So I give them resources, and we'll talk about this in a moment, where they go first to try to get unstuck. And then if they have tried for a while and been unsuccessful, or if it's a really major technical issue, then they set to red. And so the way I interpret these in my classroom is I try to only answer a question if a cup is set at red, which again is like that emergency question. But depending on the time and if there aren't a lot of questions, sometimes I'll go and just stop by the yellow groups and maybe give them some tips to get unstuck, but not solve their problem for them. The other way that I've seen this used, and I'm thinking about doing it just to try it out, is that green is the same. It means we're good to go. Red is when they have a question. So they'll just automatically put their cup to red if they have a question, instead of raising their hand in the air forever waiting for you. And then you as the teacher or facilitator, when you have gone and heard their question and you give them a tip for getting unstuck, then you set their cup to yellow. And that's a visual reminder for you to go back to them and check after a few minutes and see if they've made any progress given the information and the tips and the tricks that you gave them. And then, of course, if they end up getting unstuck on their own, they can change the cup to green. And so you just keep an eye out visually for cups that are red, and then cups that are yellow is a reminder to you to check back. The other nice thing is there's a little auditory cue when you put the cups together or pick them up. And so that's nice for me as a teacher because I get the visual, but I also get the auditory cue because we don't always notice the silent hand in the air, especially if it's on the other side of the room. So that is the cup system, and we use this in our trainings as well as teachers, and we've had great success with it. People have used things besides cups, as long as they're the red, yellow, green color system, or you can change the color code if you can only find certain colors at your local party store or grocery store or whatever. The other thing that we really like to do, and give you a little visual for this, is the AS3 Then Me process. And many teachers have a version of this in their classrooms already, so this is familiar. But essentially, it makes students responsible for solving their own problems and also articulating those problems. So it's just what it sounds like. They have to ask 3 others before they can raise their hand or, in my case, change their cup color to get help. And we like this because it facilitates problem solving, and really, truly, it eliminates the most trivial questions. If it's just something that you've said many times and you told the class, or it's in one of your resources for getting unstuck, chances are their peers are going to catch that and be able to help the students with that, instead of you having to repeat the same thing over and over. But one of the things that I like the most about this strategy is it gives students that practice in verbalizing what their problem is and how they've tried to solve it. And so they're talking through the problem at least 3 times, probably more than that because they've discussed it with their partner. And by the time it gets to you, they should have really nailed down what the problem is and have a better understanding of that as well. So it enables them to practice those skills and, again, saves you a lot of trouble in the classroom. So that's a great strategy. Another video from week 2 that you guys were asked to watch and perhaps have or will is the Getting Unstuck video. And in the video, she talks about a lot of different strategies for that, and they're all great. One of them is just to give resources and look other places to see what other people have done. And we have a whole stack of resources with Project Guts for students to get unstuck, and they're all on our projectguts.org webpage. And I'll go ahead and put the link to that in our chat so you can have it. It's really simple. Projectguts.org and then resources page is /resources. And so as you're implementing or facilitating, you're going to see a lot of these resources on this page. But I'm just going to scroll down to where it says Star Logo Nova resources and give you a really quick tour of these resources because they're really the first line of defense in my classroom and even in our workshops to help facilitate participants getting unstuck or students getting unstuck and get them used to finding the answers and learning those concepts on their own. So this is the section that we want. The very first link is videos on Star Logo Nova Basics, and I'm not going to open that up, but that is what it sounds like. There are videos much like what you've seen in the MOOC so far. Some of them are exactly the same, and they just go over basic concepts of Star Logo Nova. So those are useful for students, maybe English language learners or with learning disabilities who need that visual and that auditory. One of my favorites is this All Blocks and Drawers PDF. And we like to print these out in color and give them to everyone, just one copy. But teachers, of course, in my classroom, I don't have a color printer. And so laminating a few of these so you have one per pair at least, or making a giant poster or projecting it on the board while students are working, is found to be really useful as well. This eliminates frustration of trying to find out what drawer the block you need is in. So real quick guide to all of the blocks that are possible, and students can see, okay, I need the is equal to block, and that's in logic. And that's very helpful because they might have otherwise have wasted time looking in math. So this, I call it the cheat sheet. It's the guide to all the blocks in the drawers. Is super useful. We also hand out the Math Basics PDF, which has a guide to all of Spaceland and what heading and coordinates are, which is especially helpful for students who may not have strong math skills, but they can look at this and build those. So it's a really good guide for them in understanding angles and turning in axis and everything like that. We've also got the debugging tips for Star Logo Nova, which I'll open up. And this is, I call it the frequently asked questions. So these are common things that are going to happen in Star Logo Nova just because of the way that browsers or the program itself works. And so students should look at this if they have one of those common problems before they ask a question, even before they ask their peers. So it's a great line of defense and really does a good job of walking them through. Like for instance, something really common is that slider values don't change correctly if you don't follow these exact steps. So it gives you a walkthrough of what to do with that. Okay, and then we have a whole list, and this is kind of like the gospel of problem-solving practices for teachers to facilitate problem solving in students. And there are so many of them, we can't possibly do all of them, but everyone can look at it and pick out a few to make sure that you're not just providing students with the answers, but rather are facilitating their discovery of the answer and helping them work through frustration and things like that. So one of the best examples is asking questions first and making suggestions second. So making them articulate the question and what their model is supposed to do. Another one I love is standing behind the computer, so you can't even see their code, and asking them to explain the problem and then giving them feedback as well. Never taking over the keyboard, things like that, so that the students really are responsible for their own learning there. And then last but not least, we have this beautiful Star Logo Nova cookbook. And this is where students can go if they're struggling with a particular topic and need a walkthrough of how to do it. For instance, we have add or rename ingredients, and that's something we didn't do in Module 1, but that you'll be able to do later, and that could be beneficial for students. So it walks through. Unfortunately, our pages aren't numbered yet, but it gives really good screenshots of what to do and examples. And as you can see, there are 22 different topics. So it's great also for students who finish early and want to take their code to another level. They can look in there and pick something or see how to do something they want to do. So those are all the resources which are great for giving students to help them get unstuck. You can print them out, you can put them up digitally for them, whatever works best in your classroom or in your training environment. Okay. One of the activities from Module 1 is complex versus complicated, and there's a great video about complex adaptive systems and as well as, emergent behavior. So, and in the activities provided, there is a PowerPoint called Complex versus Complicated. So we like to facilitate this activity in workshops and in our classroom, and it's great for discussion. One of the questions was from the last webinar, does something have to meet all 4 characteristics to be complex? And so you can discuss that with students before or after the activity, and they use those characteristics of complex adaptive systems as evidence in argument for this game. So essentially what it is, you can see on my screen here, I've got complex versus complicated, and I say with cups or with fingers, excuse me, because in my classroom, we'll go through a bunch of slides, and students will work in pairs, and since they've already got their cups, they'll hold up a red cup if they decide it's complex, and a green cup if they decide it's complicated, and then I will call on pairs to give evidence to their argument and back it up. And so they get practice using the language of those 4 characteristics, and ultimately what usually happens is we decide it all depends on the level that you look at the problem or the system. So here's an example of a school of fish, which, like birds flocking in the video, is a complex adaptive system because it's made up of many agents following simple rules and so on. I like to do this activity, and its progression in the module is actually before the turn and walk activity. Excuse me. So the turn and walk activity is one of many participatory simulations in the Project Cuts curriculum. This is the very first one that you guys will do on the very first day. So in the video, you get to see that in action. As a science teacher, I loved to have students come up with more hypotheses, like what would happen if we stand in a triangle, or what would happen if we face the other direction, and so on. But the great thing about this is, number one, you get right into the discussion when you show the model of what's included in the model and what's left out. So that is a great example of abstraction. Why do we choose to include some things in a computer program, and why do we leave other things out? What is the computer program better at doing than the real world model? And ultimately, I love to tie this back into complex versus complicated so that students can use their critical thinking skills and determine whether or not they think that the turn and walk system is complex or complicated. And so I'll kind of leave that to you guys for the moment to think about. And if you are not sure, that's something that we can discuss in the questions at the end. Okay, moving right along. We're almost done with all the tips and tricks. The last activity that we're going to discuss before we get into questions is dice and data. And this is part of lesson 4 when you're introducing distribution. So you can see on my slide here, we have the distribution of rolling a single die and the distribution of rolling 2 die and taking their sum. And you should have a pretty even distribution with a single die. And students should see that there's definitely a more common distribution when you get the sums. And in my high school class, I make the analogy of the craps game. Might not be appropriate for middle school students, and they may not know what it is. But they should recognize that 6, 7, and 8 are the most common numbers that show up, 7 being the most common. And so a couple tips for this activity. First off, I like to use the cups in a couple different ways. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'll kind of demonstrate that for you guys. The number one lifesaver for this activity is if you're using cups already in the classroom, or even if you're not, for this activity, you're going to want students to have a cup. What they do is they put the dice in the cup, they shake the cup with their hand over it, and then they look at the dice once it stopped rolling, and they can see the value that is on the dice without it leaving the cup. This will save tons of time and headache from them chasing dice all over the classroom. And this is even a tip that I would use if I were training teachers in this activity. Make them use the cup. The other thing is, since this activity segues into understanding wiggle walk and random walk and how agents move realistically, I like to put my students in groups of 3 after the activity, after they've done the summation with the 2 dice. And one of them will put a dice in a green cup. That will be the right direction. One of them will put one in a red cup. And then one of them will be the turtle or the agent. So the green person will shake the dice, and whatever value is, that's how many steps the person will turn in one direction. And then the other person will shake the one in the red cup, and that's how many steps they'll turn in the other direction. And then the agent or the student takes a step forward and they repeat that process. And it really helps them visualize before they see it on the screen that there ends up being a balance, and most commonly the agents are going to go forward with a little bit of wiggle in their walk. So especially for younger students, that's really helpful in cementing that understanding. So those are my tips and tricks for setting up all of the modules, as well as some of the more interesting parts of Module 1. So at this time, I'd love to open it up for questions about anything we've talked about. And I'll go ahead and unmute everyone. And then if you could just mute yourselves unless you have a question, then unmute yourself and I'll be happy to go over it with you. Any questions?
I guess this is Irene.
Hi, Irene.
Hi, how are you?
Great, how are you?
Good, good. So I was wondering if participants were stuck anywhere in the first module or found any place where they need help, or if they have any recommendations for places where the curriculum could be clearer. Nothing.
Okay.
Do we want to give a preview or find out where what people are thinking of for the module they're going to work on for next week?
Sure, that sounds great.
Adrian, have you selected a module? You're on mute, by the way.
Yeah, I looked at chemical reactions.
Okay. And do you have any questions about it thus far, or?
No, I'm good. I'm just jumping in and doing the stuff.
Sounds good. Mark, what
Thanks.
did you? Hi.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I am going to work on module 3.
The life science?
Yes.
Good.
I haven't started with it yet, though. I just barely got teaching module 1 finished, so I'll probably start tomorrow.
Okay. And how's your, are you finding it helpful to work on the portfolio?
Yeah. So far, I've been able to get everything to work, I think. The only part where I got stuck for just a little bit was I can't remember now, but I got unstuck, so that's, I guess, wasn't a big deal. But it's been all good so far.
Okay. Are you going to be teaching students or teaching teachers?
I'll be teaching teachers, so I'm coming to New Orleans in a couple weeks,
Great.
and we have some teachers signed up for a 2-day training we're going to do the end of June, and we have our veteran facilitator coming in from New Mexico, I think. So everything's moving forward.
That's fantastic. Where are you located?
Dallas, Texas.
Okay, good.
I think that's me.
Oh,
I'll be your
okay.
veteran facilitator.
Well, great.
Wonderful.
Yeah, great to meet you.
Yeah, Lonnie and I are looking forward to it.
Nice.
All right.
Okay, there's also Tanya on the line. Tanya, can you unmute and tell us what module you picked and how you're doing?
I am on the road coming back from North Carolina, heading to Georgia, but I am going to be working on module 3.
Okay, great. And Wendy.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, great.
Well, we won't bother you so you can drive safely. Wendy? Oh, can't hear her. Oh well. I don't know. What do you want to do, Melody?
Well, if anyone has anything that they're working on that they'd like an overview of, we can go over that. If not, I don't want to force everyone to stay on.
Right.
But we're here to talk about implementation, to answer questions about the specific modules, anything related to project specs that you guys may have. And like I said, if not, that's okay.
Hi, this is Tanya again. I was wondering if how the modules work and the workshops work as becoming a facilitator. Are we going to be able to see some of that in motion in New Orleans, or are we waiting for the summer to see that at our workshops where you guys come in as the experts?
Do you want to talk about that, Melody, or do you want me to take a stab at it?
I think you know more about that than I do, Irene.
Okay.
Take it away.
So I don't know if you're familiar with any of the other Code.org programs, but they use.
I'm an elementary, the CS
Great.
facilitator for the fundamentals.
Super. So we use some of the same techniques. Basically, it's called TLO, stands for Teacher Leader Observer. So when we get to New Orleans, we'll break into groups and you'll be assigned something to practice teaching. And there'll be people in the room who will be your students or the learners. There'll be one of our senior or junior facilitators as an observer. And you'll get to practice teaching and get some feedback on it. And we'll go in rounds, so you'll see all of the activities being presented. Does that make sense?
I'm trying to wrap my brain around how it's all working with the Starlo, the Nova, and everything. It just seems, of course, so much more complicated than the elementary school level and how it's all going to fit in the curriculum with everything. So that will be, I think that'll clarify things. Thank you.
Okay, so I think the other thing you're asking is maybe how it fits into the middle school day or into the science class. Is that your question, Tanya?
Yes, just how it's all fit in, because when we do, like, we basically give a lot of, with the fundamentals class, just reasons why it should be taught and things like that. And that part apparently will already be established. And that's, we don't have, do you go cover that in your workshops as well for teachers, or is it just starting off going right into the curriculum and then how to implement the program in their classroom?
Right. We'll go over the foundations and the philosophy just briefly. We really think the time spent together is best used, having you practice and giving you feedback and clarifying any misconceptions or any areas where you feel uncomfortable with the content or the tool.
Great. Thank you.
And as far as implementing during the school year, we've seen it done different ways. We've had successful teams where in a class, they do something similar to Module 1. And then in the science class, they can jump right into one of the content area modules, depending on what they're covering in their curriculum. Other teachers teach the Module 1 within the science class and then follow that with the module. Does anyone else have any questions? Wendy or Mark or Jackie? Jackie, I didn't hear what you were, what module you'll be doing.
No. Is this working?
Okay.
Can you hear
There
me?
you are. Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I'm going to do the greenhouse gas and climate change because I felt that that was my weakest unit. We went to NGSS here in Las Vegas, and that was my unit that I really struggled with the most to get the kids engaged. So I'm thinking that this unit will be the most profitable for me in terms of finding new resources. So I'm really excited about it.
Yes. And I think it really helps hit home for kids some of the dynamics and understanding greenhouse gases.
I teach 6th grade, Wendy. She just asked in the chat.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Sorry, I'm
Oh,
not
okay.
in the chat.
Oh, I have the chat window open, so I saw. Oh, good. I'm glad other people are doing the climate change one too.
Great. Melody, it's all yours. I'm going to sign off.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Irene. All right, thank you, everybody. It was great meeting you. I should see a lot of you guys in New Orleans. And if you do have any questions or comments, feel free to post in the forum. And that's the best because then we can learn from, or everyone else can learn from your question. But also feel free to email us directly and we'll answer those questions. It looks like everyone's got a good hold on Module 1, so I'm excited to dive into the next modules with you guys. and we'll be looking forward to helping you out with that as well. Have a good afternoon, everyone. Signing off.